Well, hello. Today we've got a very uh, excellent guest, uh, Kier. I don't know if you want to just give a quick hi.
Hi, yes, yes, thank you very much. An excellent guess. That's lovely.
Today we're speaking with Kier, who is someone who has an immense amount of lived experience and interaction with the Mental Health Act and the BC mental health system. And you're somebody who has really lived it, Kier. And I think we're all interested just to know where it all began, when things started, and where your journey really begins.
Yeah, okay. So initially I I wanted to talk to someone smart. And I thought psychiatrists were knew the truth, knew the answers. And so I was 18 and I went to see a psychiatrist. And after talking with about two or three of them, I figured out that they didn't really know anything much. They just sort of circled around things and didn't delve deep into who I was or what I was trying to convey to them to get help. They offered medication, of course. And on that medication, because of how I was feeling initially, and then the medication made me have suicidal thoughts for the first time. And I did act on that. So I overdosed at 19. And I went back to the psychiatrist, the same one who gave me the pills. And all he said to that was, I think we need to up the dose. So I got rid of psychiatry for that was it. I canceled all my appointments.
And what happened after that? What did your
So
life?
I went into my own seeking the actual truth about healing and taking it into your own hands, because that's what essentially happens with healing is you do the work. You don't go to someone and they give you the answers, because that just doesn't happen. I've researched my entire life this modality of healing energy. I stumbled across that in my when I was 36 and have been doing that ever since.
You know,
So that's my path.
yeah. Wow. We hear so often this term healing, and I think it takes many different forms for many different people, and there's a lot of different methods, I suppose, to doing that. And I think your story is interesting because you've had a number of different methods to healing over time, um, especially as you say with that initial sort of interaction with the mental health system and coming out. What were those aspects? What were those things that you did to, you know, maybe reflect, but also look forward through your healing path?
Well, basically, I stumbled across a course in miracles. That book was life changing for me. I really resonated with the simplicity of listening to the light or the dark, ego or spirit, yourself, and gaining, momentum with that, with Eckhart Tolle, who came later in The Power of Now and New Earth, those books. I was like, oh, there's the truth, right? And I wasn't seeing psychiatry at all during this time, because this is the path that I was going on. This resonated with me. And so I started practicing Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. And I started making those dresses my art. In like I made 30, 40 of them within a span of a couple of weeks. Yeah, I went really fast. But the ideas came to me, right? And I have training. I did go to school for 5 years for art. So
Wow.
yeah, and the thing is the doctors always say, how long do you spend? I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Trying to quantify their bipolar label that makes no sense and isn't real.
Yeah, as someone who has, been through the system as well, I recently read something about on a blog with a holistic psychologist. She's on Instagram. And, psychologists are so different than psychiatrists, and I've had a lot of great counselors in my past. And for me, a lot of it rooted back to trauma. So, healing trauma and healing holistically really resonates with me too. And that truth, that you feel. Um, so anyways, in the holistic psychologist, she had this post that said that the bipolar label, because we know labels aren't great for people, they don't help them beyond a certain point. um, the bipolar label is kind of to replace the hysteria label, and hysteria was this female kind of oppression of like the system not listening and giving space to women back in the 1800s, and then drugging them, or I think
Yeah.
also like just interesting history around hysteria. um but I wanted to ask you, in terms of the systemic oppression that you faced in your life, or the ways that the system has harmed you, would you like to share a little bit about some of the trauma that you've experienced? And of course, I want to be mindful, you don't have to share anything you don't want to, but what has your trauma looked like?
Yeah, so interesting because I could say beyond a shadow in my experience, because I've done a lot of healing work, my past was easier to heal than the trauma that they keep re-traumatizing me every month. Is it is so big, being put in, handcuffed, being put in little cells, thrown food, no blanket, just stabbed with needles, and all these guys watching, laughing. It just, the cruelty that I've experienced, I didn't experience that growing up, not cruelty like that. And I said that to one of the psychiatrists when they put me down below in the quote unquote cell, for making a dress very fast because they thought I was manic. They didn't realize that that's my art. So, anyways, this cell that they put you down in, or the people are like pretty much drooling and heads, like you would see in some horror movie. And I walked around and there's a yoga mat. So I grabbed the yoga mat and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do what I do. And everyone, and it's one room too. There's no space, there's no computer, there's no anything. So you all had to shovel into one room. And there was no, shower curtains or anything like that.
So is this cell that you're talking about, is it in Victoria? Is it in,
The Royal Jubilee, yeah. Down on the
and this is
in
like
yeah, it's called
it's
solid.
sorry, I just want to know a bit more about these conditions, because they sound incredibly dehumanizing, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah,
Um,
they are, and someone needs to see it. There's nurses and they chart every second. Every second I have all the records. I'm like, this is insanity.
so yeah, I can't. So this cell, these jail-like situations where everyone's in this one room and it sounds super acute. Um, what was your experience, coming back to the mental health care system? So you said that you had this experience when you're 18 and 19, and
Yeah.
you kind of said psychiatry is not going to help me, and you left it. What
Yeah.
happened later that brought you back to it?
So, 2014, I had an experience. I was downloading a lot of energy. I was doing cranial sacral work and different forms of like Reiki, right? And the psychiatrists are like, telling me that Reiki is not real and people aren't energy and energy isn't real. Anyways, so 2014, I had an experience with my mom and I thought she was having a heart attack. My dad died like 8 months prior. I was severely traumatized from that. I left my partner who was, we just didn't get along. My daughter was 4 and I was homeless. So I was stressed and I was also experiencing, and my mom had had a heart attack the year previous. So she was walking around talking about this is the death or this is the anniversary of my heart attack. And I just found her behavior peculiar and she found my behavior peculiar. My sister ended up calling and said, "What's going on with you guys?" She was, suspicious, I guess, or something. And she ended up calling the police. So not only the police, but like a fire truck. All I remember was a fire truck, a police van, and they literally didn't let me say anything. They took me and they handcuffed me and put me, without any shoes in the back of a van. And I was obviously in shock. I knew with my training, energetic training, not to flip out, respond to how I was feeling, and just go with it for now and be calm.
So in BC, there's this draconian mental health act that if anybody calls 911 on anybody else and says, I'm worried about their mental health, they bring the police in. And I myself have been handcuffed and put into a police car as well, which makes no sense. And
Yeah.
you had the awareness to not fight it, and to go along with it. So what happened after you went in the
So,
police car? Did they
well,
take you to the hospital?
then they took me there and they shot me up with something before they questioned me. And so I didn't know, like I have all the records and I'm reading it. And I remember, and I was saying, like, I'm floating up to heaven or something like that. But they had recorded, oh, she's not making any sense. I'm like, no, you gave me a drug. You know what I mean? And that
Yes,
was,
yes.
yeah. And I was telling the truth about how I was feeling after being medicated with Abilify.
Yeah, and this happened to me as well when I was brought into the hospital was immediate drugs before
Yeah.
a doctor talked to me. So they have these frontline drugs, and in my case, they told me later that they gave me the wrong drug and they overdosed me on that. They're like, we gave you the wrong drug, we gave you too much. And so I also was tripping out because I'd been injected with the drug.
Wow.
And then those, like you said, those things that you say when you're tripping out, like I remember I said, because
Yeah.
I was on a psychotropic drug, I said, I feel like a tiger is falling through the ceiling. Like I remember saying that and being like, I don't
Yeah.
know, this makes sense, but I'm literally seeing a tiger come through the ceiling. Why do
Yeah.
we drug
That,
people before we talk to them? Like,
right.
I don't understand.
Right. Exactly what you're saying, because they drug you and then they analyze you. So if they want to analyze people drugged, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense.
None of it makes any sense. Yeah. And
Mm.
so the psychiatrist that you saw back then in 2014, what was that experience like? How long were you in the hospital for?
4 months, because I told the truth. I said, I'm in a Kundalini awakening and I can feel energy. And they're like, oh, even though it's in their book, Spiritual Emergence, right? They are like, oh, bipolar, what is it called? Delusional state of grandiosity. That's what delusional state of grandiosity. That's what. Bipolar 1 with psychoses. Yeah, psychoses. That's what they call energy. Psychotic.
Yeah, and as someone who practiced Kundalini yoga growing up, in other places in the world, in India, in South America, when someone is exhibiting these visions that you have talked about and that I have also experienced a Kundalini awakening, it's a normal part of a spiritual progression. You know, all people who do yoga for a time, or they meditate, or they do Course in Miracles, there is very clear books out there written by psychiatrists like Stanislav Grof, like so many psychedelic researchers now are pointing to the same thing, that these altered states or these experiences that are non-ordinary are actually sometimes someone being initiated as a healer and someone going through their own spiritual process. So it sounds like these psychiatrists were completely not open to spirituality or to different understandings of energy.
No, so I put my case, and I knew that, and then and I had evidence for everything. And so I put my case on my wall in my room, and they didn't like that. So one day they came, and I was doing it just for the lawyer so I could get some clarity. And they ripped everything down, and they broke my radio, and they put me down again. Yeah, just for, what was that for? That wasn't for anything. Oh, for putting my case up. Yeah, because they want you just to be a robot, right?
Yeah, these are, I think, very upsetting events that you're telling us about right now from your personal journey through the mental health care system. One thing that struck me about you, not only yours but others, and I think especially in the case of your journey, has been not only these really, as you're describing, um, uncomfortable, distressing, um, odd. I'll include that word in there.
Yeah.
Interactions with psychiatrists and the mental health system, but then on top of that, there's this whole, as you're describing, casework. And I think when you're talking about casework in this context, you're meaning legal casework, right? Which
Yeah.
is your legal case, which is kind of on top of everything else that's going on in terms of the sort of mental health, what they would call kind of the physical system, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Which is connected but slightly different, as I've understood it from you and talking with others. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about, going from being detained and having these really intrusive and terrible experiences with some of the psychiatrists and some of the physicians, and then this whole other element of sort of the legal realm and the legal case that you picked up for yourself, but have really carried forward up till this point.
Yeah. The tribunals.
Yes.
The tribunals, you have to have a tribunal to be decertified. So you have to basically go to court and win a case. Like they're asking this of, drugged people who are experiencing trauma. And that is the only route out. So I've done that a couple times, and I'm doing it again, but I'm also doing other avenues, right? There's section, I can't remember, 52, where you can actually go and a judge will decide instead, which is we're working on that. Health Justice is working on that with me to get another, not a psychiatric, like the psychiatrist, not a psychiatrist assessment, but a private assessment to use
I'm
in
so glad.
court.
I'm so glad that Health Justice is there supporting you. And, you know, Kyle and I have deep, deep respect for Health Justice, and we want to get them
Yeah,
on the podcast. So what I'm hearing from you, Kier, is that you faced violence in the system. Like
yeah,
people were cruel toward you, dehumanizing you. Um, and so after this, and they kept you for 4 months because you spoke the truth.
yeah.
And, you know, when I was in the hospital, I had one of the orderlies, you know, on the psych ward. She was, you know, not a nurse. She was just an orderly. She was cleaning. And she's like, she came up to me in the hallway and she's like, Emmy, I've been here before. This is how you get out. You just take the drugs. You say everything. You lie. You lie. You just
Like,
go with what they're saying
yeah.
and you just pretend like you're sick and you'll get out. Just do what they
Wow.
say. And she just whispered it to me like in the hallway,
Wow.
you
Yeah,
know, and
no.
she knew, and she had been there. She had been there, you know, and she was like this angel on the board that if I hadn't have heard that, if I had just kept speaking
Oh,
the truth, which
yeah.
I would have been kept longer than the few days that I was
Yeah,
there,
you
but
would meet.
you are committed to the truth. You're committed to the truth,
Mhm.
and you fought it through the Mental Health Act, because they give you like a copy of it, right? And I remember in this drug state, I was trying to make sense of everything, and I couldn't understand the Mental Health Act because it's legal jargon. So it was like
Yeah,
the director, this, who is this, and I'm
I
like, what does this
know.
thing
Yeah.
even mean?
Oh,
And later,
it's
Kyle and I
like,
found, you know, go ahead, go ahead.
no, it just is what you're saying. It's so ridiculous because I studied this stupid thing. And it's ridiculous to put these penal eyes on, you know. Am I a criminal for thinking my mom had a heart attack? You know, like I don't understand. I'm like, what are your grounds for doing this for a decade? There isn't anything.
So the doctor released you on the condition that you would take this medication.
Yeah, I'm like, not indefinitely. The nurse, Melanie, lied to me, and she's gone behind my back, and she had me put in the hospital because she was paranoid. And she calls the police on me every month, you know, and then it's just such a crazy setup. And I'm supposed to talk to these people and have like a nice conversation like today with the doctor and the nurse, forced to.
So these two people that were violent towards you, dehumanizing you, power tripping, probably
Yeah,
because the system gives them that authority, they have said that so this, they have said that you need to be on this medication. Is that what, or this
yeah.
nurse is seeing you and assessing you and saying, you need to get this medication? Like, can you tell me more about like the legal
Oh,
conditions of?
okay. So she actually writes me texts and she says, if you don't go right now, I'll call the police and you won't know when they're coming. It could be in the day or the night, and like weird stuff like that. And she says, and I wouldn't want your daughter to see that. And they might take you to the hospital. And who knows how long you have to stay. Like, you know, threatening or like, what is that? Abusive? Beyond.
So this nurse that saw you in the hospital and was required to have follow-up, like was she your caseworker? Like what?
Yeah, for 7 years.
For 7 years, she was your
Mhm.
caseworker in the system. And she was threatening you that if you didn't go back to the hospital and get the drugs, that she was going to call the police on
Oh,
you.
yeah.
That's completely manipulative and completely threatening. And, you know, was there any possibility of getting away from her? Like, could you,
Well,
or was the doctor ordering?
today going to ask her who her superior is, who she, because I've got enough stuff on her that I don't, she doesn't need to abuse me anymore. So I'm going to ask for another case manager. She's just a case manager and she just thinks she's God. I don't know.
I really hope that you find a new case manager and that, they're able to get rid of this person for you, because it sounds like they are abusing their power and they are taking away your freedoms. And you have these texts and you have evidence of this kind of language. And,
Yo,
unfortunately, sorry, go ahead.
and audio I have.
Yeah, and audio. So you have a lot of proof and you have been so brave in fighting this in a legal way. So, first of all, I just wish you all the best with it. And I want you to be free from all of this. That's my vision for you, is that you never have to answer to anybody for your own, wellness, and, that, yeah. So can you tell us a bit about the pharmaceutical aspect of this? And we know that psychiatry is based on pharmaceuticals. People make a lot of money off of Abilify. Was the most expensive drug for a long time on the market. It costs $100 a month or more. Yet there's coverage. Sorry,
500.
500. So it costs a lot of money. People are making a lot of money off of it. And the system, it's interesting because the system will cover drugs, but not counseling, like not in-person counseling.
Right. They medicate you. They don't heal you.
Yeah. So they're there to medicate. And we know that people get better from the system, but they never report on it. So people that recover and get better never return to the system. So the system loses touch with them. And their data is flawed and their methodology is flawed because they're not seeing the whole person. They're labeling you with a diagnosis from the DSM and giving you this drug. So, what would you say to other people out there who have been diagnosed, given a label, and given a drug? Like, what is your kind of advice on a peer-to-peer level about that?
I would say don't listen to the label. Do your research about how the book was evolved. And we all have extreme states, up and down, left, sideways, backwards. I don't know. I think we're all just human, experiencing the human experience. And if someone needs assistance in a specific experience, then ask a psychologist, a counselor, but don't go to psychiatry. You're not going to get an answer there. You're going to get a death sentence, possibly. So.
Wow. Kira, I think that really summarized it very strongly for your own experience and many others. Your last quote there. I think it's important also to note that our particular situation is not one that is in any way, sadly, I think, unique. I mean, we're hearing the number of detentions under the Mental Health Act in the province of British Columbia skyrocket. I think we're somewhere above 20,000 involuntary detentions per year. And that's trending in the upward direction. That is the highest per capita in Canada, which also, if you look in general globally, has a high number of detentions per capita in general.
You're right there, detentions, right? Detentions rather than, periods of time for people to rebuild their psyche. Like, right?
Absolutely. The wording, and I think,
it criminalizes us. It criminalizes people that are suffering, anybody who's suffering, right? Sorry to interrupt you, Kyle, but I'm just like, the BC Schizophrenia Society was hand in hand with the police, according to our interview with Rob Wypon, which people can can go back and listen to, the draconian measures in our legal system were created by people in fear and
Yeah.
in violent takedowns of the worst case scenario, which from vast majority of the population, we are suffering because our systems are falling apart, because we don't have stable housing, because we have relationships then, because we're grieving, because people have died, because we may face racism. Like there's a million different reasons why suffering happens, but why are we criminalizing the
Yeah.
suffering?
Right. An experience. Who's to say, oh, that experience is criminal? You know, there's no level playing field. It's like psychiatry is, have this omnipotent godlike complex where they don't even talk, though. They don't even help. They don't even do therapy. They just give regurgitated stories about why people need the medications. Oh, you have that symptom? Let's look it up. That symptom is probably on every drug in the book. It's the symptoms are, it's laughable, but it's killing. So it's that two sides, because this book has so much weight and it needs to just go.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of aspects here, Kier, and I just want to draw these out a little bit more. When back in 2014, when you kind of brought us back, in that case, you were, in a hospital facility for a 4-month period of time. But as I understand your story, you were eventually still under the Mental Health Act, but able to go home essentially.
Right. Released. Yeah.
Released, yeah, and then you kind of have a renewal sort of cycle that happens 6 months where you're kind of at home but still forcibly injected, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay.
So they say you're free, but I don't feel free. I mean, I feel free in my soul, in my spirit, and who I truly am, but not in the world of, the 3D world that I have to operate in, because they can come get me anytime. And she knows that, and she writes me that, and she's re-traumatizing me, and so is the doctor. They've both said that to me. I have it.
Yeah, wow, that is very
Yeah.
shocking. um as your sort of battle goes along, and both legally, but also I imagine in a big sense, sort of mentally, to just absorb the sort of pressure that you're facing, and still
Yeah.
resilience at the end of the day is absolutely commendable. And I wonder, looking forward, what do you see would be most helpful for you um, in your sort of journey forward? What is it that you think? What is it that you think is going to be best for your own sort of mental resilience and sustainability um, moving forward?
So while I'm still under the,
No,
yeah.
no, just in general. If
Oh,
you could come from
oh,
out,
free.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't, because it's been a decade. I was 44, and I don't even remember what it's like to not have to be free, to not have to go, oh, I need to take a pill at this time. Okay, what's that? Driven by these medications, because the body becomes addicted. And so you are a bit of a slave to keeping the body, and mind in check, because of the initial bomb, Abilify Maintaina, that they blow into your mind. That's what I've had to do, take medications to counter Abilify.
Yeah, there's a lot of side effects to Abilify, and the DSM-5 and the DSMs, these are the books that you're talking about, the one that has so much weight, the one that psychiatrists resort to diagnosing and treating. The DSM sees these conditions as lifelong. And we know for a fact that they're not, that a lot of people get over their suffering and heal and
Yeah,
get better.
like, that's
And
it.
they're short term, right? Like these could be short term experiences where if someone, and it doesn't sound like this was your case at all, but if someone was like, wanting to take their own life, these meds could be a short term solution to stabilize them. But that's not what they're being used for. They're being used for profit. And, this is
That's
controversial for some people to hear because they have not done the research into the fact that the DSM-5 is not even based on scientific proof of this chemical imbalance theory. My naturopath was able to map my brain chemistry, something that no doctor was able to do. But naturopaths are not covered by the mental health care system. What's
yeah,
covered
right.
is a doctor prescribing medication. So a therapist in person is not covered for many people. There are
Yeah.
some discounted and free counseling out there, but it's not a lot. There's the Wellness Together helpline that people can call and talk to a counselor, which is great. I really appreciate that. But all of these systems that are kind of like small steps forward are still feeding into the medicalized model, which says if a doctor or a random person on the street or anybody thinks that you're at risk to yourself or to somebody else, then there's a protocol that is draconian, created by, from what I've heard, the BC Schizophrenia Society and the police, that is there to shut things down super violently. And so if your life was free from the system, if you didn't have this trauma of the handcuffs, if you could rewind time and go back to that moment when you were suffering, what would you have liked to have received?
Oh, from the hospital or the,
From anybody? Like if you were in a suffering
oh
situation,
my
like
gosh,
what would have been like the
all
dream
the,
situation?
yeah. So my situation was very avoidable. If someone had looked at me and said, "How are you feeling?" or "What are you thinking?" or I had actually just went and bought a sandwich at Tim Hortons and put it on the table, and I was like thinking, my mom was in her head thinking about her heart attack, and I just, there wasn't really anyone there to check in with me, I guess. And that's all they need to do. Is the police could have checked in, doctors, nurses, people that take your name when you're waiting. Anyone could have done the small job of just, checking in. And that's what I did for people at the hospital, because I knew that they weren't doing what they should be doing, which is seeing how people really are. When you look at people in the eye and you say that or acknowledge them, it can change them. Not running up and tearing down their pants and shoving a bunch of needles in their butt. That is heinous. That is just something I don't think I'll ever get over. Because there's no point to it. It is just so avoidable. I don't know.
Here,
I think you're sorry, I'll let you go, Kyle. Go ahead.
noise. I was just gonna ask, having heard your story, which is, I think, we can all agree is memorable. It's shocking for the wrong reasons, but very memorable. Um, and I can only imagine, the range of emotions that you have felt with your interaction with the mental health system in British Columbia. And I think that your resilience is incredible. And I just wonder at the end of the day, what is it for you that gives you hope moving forward and that allows you to put that next foot in front and just carry on with life and the ongoing
Yeah. Well,
action you.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. You got to videotape me for the next half an hour. We'll see what I do. I think just basically living for now. Like I'm enjoying doing infrared yoga, and doing a lot of that, which is helping heal a lot of the muscle contractions in my body from the Abilify. Um, and doing my art, and because I don't know how long I have. I don't know. People, around me have, there's been a tragedy around me because of Abilify, and I just I don't know. But all I know is that I keep coming back to this place of hope for 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 the person who was 18, 19 that woke up and said to herself, you're going to go all the way. You're going to find the right path.
Oh, so beautiful. And, I'd love to ask you about your art too and
Oh yeah.
how you alchemized this experience.
So basically I didn't have any money for art supplies. And I looked around and all of a sudden I just saw nature in its full array of potential. And I started off doing a couple, do you want to see the little dresses? I can show you.
Yes,
And
I would love to see. I would love to see.
okay, so this one, so you see that, and this one.
Oh, so beautiful. Wow.
So those are original, and then it blew up to that size. So that's all.
Wow.
Those are absolutely incredible.
Those are
Wild.
all natural.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Oh, they're magical. They're so beautiful.
another one, that one, little one's framed. Yeah, they're flying all over.
So it's all nature that you've
Yeah.
made into these gorgeous art pieces.
Yeah, because I didn't have money for art supplies and I wanted to just go wild and explore, and so I just started picking colors, and that made sense. I was like, yeah, I like that idea.
Oh, I'm so inspired by that. And, nature is the most healing thing in my life,
Yeah.
being in nature. And, I have heard of the miracles that the body is capable of when we're in nature, when we have our bare feet on the ground,
Yes.
the
Thing.
ions, the grounding. And, if we had retreat spaces for people that were suffering or, outdoor healthy
Oh
food,
yeah,
and
that's
someone
all
to
I.
look you in the eye. That's
Yeah.
all I needed too. That's all I needed too was someone to look me in the eye and be like, "How are you actually doing?
Yeah,
I'm
you're
here
good.
as your friend. Do you want to have a meal together?"
Right. Yeah, and be a human, don't be they're criminal. They're, to attack someone like that is just not okay. It's not okay, especially for health care. No.
There's nothing okay about it, and there's nothing okay about our system, and nothing okay about the violence that happens way too often. 20,000 people like you and I that have
Yeah.
had involuntary admissions because other people have been worried, or other people
Yeah.
have been triggered,
Yeah.
or other people have,
Oh,
said, "Hey, we don't think you're okay, so we're going to inject your butt with all these drugs." That's not the solution,
it's never
people. Like,
been like
we can do
you.
better. We can do better.
Yeah, I think so. I think we could follow maybe Brazil, or where they have the retreat center like you're talking about, but they, have you heard of the one in Brazil that is a hospital? Yeah. With a forward thinking, module. And there's a couple of them actually that I can introduce you to that I've been researching. I'm like, gosh.
that would be such a helpful thing for people to have, is international models where care is happening. Like, I know Italy, I know Scandinavia, I
Yeah,
know even in the preventative models in the UK and Australia. We have South American shamanic traditions that provide a
yeah,
framework. We have yoga ashrams that provide a
yeah,
framework for healing through Kundalini awakenings. These international models hold hope for us as BC citizens, and we need to learn from them, you know?
yeah, absolutely, 100%. Oh my gosh, that needs to go right to, psychiatry floor level, and everyone needs to understand that what they're doing is opposite of what and if they do understand that, then that's criminal with intent.
I really liked what you said, Kier, there a few minutes ago, which is really what it all comes back to, right? Which is two words that are combined: health, care. And I think
Yeah,
sometimes something we often forget when we're thinking about this whole overarching mental health system, right? And really, it should all boil down to those two things: health and care.
care.
And moving forward in that light, I just think there's so much to be gleaned from putting it through that sort of lens, and really thinking about, is this necessary? Because at the end of the day, we've talked about how much, what we're spending on all of this stuff,
Yeah,
really
yeah,
helpful. I mean, each and every one of us is spending on that because it's taxpayer money. And, if we
yeah,
think about creating um, something that's going to be efficient, it's kind of in line with those two words, health and care, which should
care,
the things
care.
that are, yeah, most helpful are the things that are funded.
Yeah, that's it, health care, care. I keep telling my nurse that. I'm like, how is this caring? Of course, she won't answer, but
I hope that you're
I,
able to get a new case manager ASAP, and that
I
this new
know that
person,
to
because
happen.
I had to ask for a second opinion, and unfortunately there's not a lot of great nurses out there, but my prayer for you is that you find the perfect, kind, caring person that sees you as a whole being and sees you as on this incredible resilient journey of healing, and that you can put this 10 years behind you, and eventually, if you like,
Yeah,
never get an injection again, because that to me is bodily autonomy, and I know that's
yeah,
controversial, in our society to say, but I really do believe that we're the ones that decide what goes into our bodies, and
yeah. We're the
we
ones
deserve
to
to
live
have,
with the fallout from it,
yes,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, and the
and
side
the
effects and the, yeah. Yeah.
animal.
So I just want to just congratulate you on how far you've come and the beautiful art that you've done and the resilience, and let's pray that like health justice is able to come through for you and really
Yeah,
stand up for your rights as a person, and that no more people have to go through this kind of horrific human rights violations. And
yeah.
um so if there's anything else you'd like to share, I'd just like to open it up. And then also, if there's anything that the listeners can do to support you. So, we're happy to share if there's like, if they want to send you money for art supplies or for your case, or if there's anything that the community can do to support you, please let us know how.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Cal, do you have any other last questions?
I think I've asked most of my questions, and we've heard so much about Kier, and I just want to thank Kier for coming on and really having this to talk about this stuff, which is not always
Yeah,
fun, but you're extremely commendable, and I have to say, someone who is very much a role model. And so, yeah, I would just like to thank you so much for taking the time to.
thank you. Well, I'm glad I got to talk to you guys, and I think this would have helped me, just talking to someone, being present, right? It can change. Oh, it can change a world, really.
That's a
I
great,
love that.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think people being present together, to listen and to honor and to see each other as human beings. Like that's something that we can start to create through solidarity circles and through connecting through this podcast. So if anybody else out there, wants to reach out to us, we would love to pass on resources. And eventually I would love to start some things with Kyle and others around the province to come together to support each other, Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sounds
thank you,
amazing.
Kier.
I like information, if someone's awakening or experiencing awakening symptoms and doesn't know where to turn, or, if any information that I can't even remember what I talked about, but if anyone needs any further, anything, or just to say hi.
Thank you so much, Kier.
Yeah.